The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
And light. May your wrongs be right, may your songs be tight, may your words give sight, may your nur shine bright, may you always be on the righteous side of the fight, may your lovers be loyal, may your soil be fertile, may your khaki stay creased, may your locks stay oil, may your plans never get foiled, may your plot thicken, may your chicken be halal, may your style be sufficient, may your soul be free of its prison, may Allah increase you in your vision, may you find everything you've been missing, may you awake for prayer before the sun has risen, when you speak may your audience listen, may you never feel trapped in the system. May you sire many righteous children who will act on prophetic tradition. May you always have food on your plate. May you learn from every mistake. May you rise above all the hate. And may Allah increase you in your state. May you never pretend that you are what you ain't. May your friends be real and never be fake. May your rent never have to be late. And may your health always be great. May Allah forgive every sin, now and forever if you falter again. And may you always stay close with your kin. And may He make all your enemies friends. May He make reality of your plans. May your present be pleasant, may you have a good end. May your heart be purified of its flaws. And may you act according to the laws that were revealed in the book of Allah. And may He catch you whenever you fall. May the one guide you to the truth. And when you doubt, may He show you the proof. May you be like the Ahl Suf, with the wisdom of the elders, the energy of the youth. May He accept your prayers and your fast, the very first all the way to the last, and remove obstacles that you have. And may you receive everything that you ask. May you never have regret for your past, and receive mercy, not the wrath. And as you travel down your personal path, may you always have a reason to laugh.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the book club show Inspire 105.1 FM. I hope you enjoyed that dua by Baraka Blue. It's called Love and Light. It always kind of fills me with joy actually listening to that first thing in the morning. And it's something actually that it's something I'd recommend actually listening to quite often, because the duas as part of that are absolutely beautiful. Now the reason I was playing that is because we are today going to be discussing actually a collection of poetry by Baraka Blue. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction to anybody who maybe doesn't know much about Baraka Blue and his background. So Baraka Blue is a poet, musician, author, teacher and MC. He is highly decorated within the global artist community for his original synthesis of hip-hop and spoken word poetry with the tradition of mystical poets such as Rumi and Hafiz. So he's released quite a few albums, but basically for his research he's done a lot on kind of Sufi poetry. He holds a master's degree in Islamic studies, and he's performed basically around the world. We've actually had the pleasure of hosting him in Luton on 2 occasions, and he so we as part of actually Imrana, which is a local Muslim women's organisation, we held a poetry night at the Hat Factory, which was the Connors Cafe. So he is an amazing individual, amazing poet. So this collection of poetry, the book is called Empty and the Ocean. So we'll give you a blurb at the back. In the name of infinite compassion and mercy, what you hold in your hands is a collection of poems. These poems are reflections on living and dying and dreaming and awakening. I proceed with the firm conviction, for what reason I cannot say, that below the layers of persona we each wear, there is a place deep within where we all meet. It is for this reason that we can feel deeply the expression of another being. Without this, there would be an impassable chasm between each individual. In a forest, each tree appears an island, separate from all others. But below the surface, their roots are intimately interwoven, and more importantly, they are all woven into and out of the ground of being itself. It's a beautiful blurb just to give you background on what the collection of poetry is like. Now, what we're going to do today is just have just kind of discuss some of the poetry that he's written. But before that, I thought it'd be interesting to just give a general background on the art of poetry itself and actually how it does relate to ourselves in terms of our faith as Muslims. Now, there's a wonderful lecture by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf that you can see on YouTube, and he did an event called Shakespeare and Islam at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, I think many years ago, but you can actually see the lecture on YouTube if you just type in Shakespeare and Islam, and he actually discusses in that this the relevance of actually and how important poetry was as part of the Islamic and kind of Muslim heritage. But even prior to that, so even prior to Revelation and the prophethood of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, poetry was a very big thing in Arabia, and actually they were so eloquent in their language. And what had happened, so at the time of Revelation, actually what Sheikh Hamza Yusuf explains is the poetry reached a pinnacle in that area. So when the word of Allah was revealed and they heard it, they actually appreciated its kind of majesty straight away, and they recognized something really beautiful and profound in the words that the Prophet ﷺ was actually kind of sharing with them. And even actually it's explained in the lecture that even there was a time that to study the Quran, there was actually a prerequisite to know or have studied poetry. So it's really interesting actually when we think about maybe I guess nowadays where we have our young people or you know older even where we want to study the Quran and you know be Hafiz and etc. Mashallah, they're really beautiful intentions, but just knowing that actually historically that actually being able to study you know Arabic poetry was such a important thing, just so you could actually really go in depth of what the meaning of the Quran. So I actually, when I first heard that, I thought it was really interesting, and also obviously we know when we're reading the Quran, there's a whole chapter which is called the poets, and I guess there's kind of a difference in terms of how that language is used in terms of what a poet is and what a poet does. So obviously we know that the Prophet ﷺ was at times accused of just being a poet, or you know the words that he was saying, so it was always to kind of ridicule him, and that's because obviously there was also a time when poetry was used to just almost as a form of I guess distraction or just maybe not having much meaning. But by the same token that it was trying to show that actually the Quran, even though it's kind of poetic in its form and it's poetic in, you know, how when you read it and when you listen to it, obviously it's the word of Allah is always going to be greater. But again, it's just this kind of comparison between poetry and the arts, I guess, in general, which I think is really amazing. And the fact that, again, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf in this talk explains that obviously if the word poet is sha'ir, okay, so if you speak Urdu, and we'll recognize that straight away, that a sha'ir is a poet. But in Arabic, the word for hair is shahr. So it's amazing. When I heard this, I was like, it was completely like my mind was blown. I was like, whoa, okay. So obviously, if anyone who studied poetry, we know that every word has a root word in Arabic. So the word for poet is sha'ir, but the root word is actually shahr, which is I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's hair. And the reason is because hair, it gives you, obviously we know, so for example, we're in a certain situation where we say our hair is standing on end. It's because there's this tactile stimulation that actually our body feels, and our hair kind of reacts to that. And I guess the analogy is the same. The fact that when we hear really good poetry and that feeling of goosebumps or sometimes that we get, how similar it is in terms of the sensitivity, of the hair on our bodies. So again, really beautiful comparisons where we start thinking actually a bit more deeper into what poetry is. And obviously that brings me hopefully nicely onto the book by Baraka Blue called Empty and the Ocean. And it's a really wonderful collection of poems. And in his introduction, he just really explains about the fact that again, he talks actually about this idea of the one who feels, and the fact that a poet feels and provides the container so others may imbibe meaning, and thereby access feeling within themselves. Not feeling in the superficial and whimsical sense, but feeling as a type of intelligence or intuitive knowing. Feeling as the extraordinary ability to experience the vast array of potentialities that consciousness allows. Poets are locksmiths, fashioning keys, unlocking forgotten rooms, whole wings of neglected palatial manors, enormous cages, minuscule ones, secret passageways, tomb complexes, ancient fortresses, or anything else that may require an unlocking. Or poets are excavators with shovels and pickaxes, tiny brushes and miniature chisels, like archaeologists, digging into the forgotten knowledge of who we always were. So poetry, for some reason, has the ability to access the deeper recesses of the human soul more efficiently than any other form of language, written or spoken. So that's kind of what Baraka Blue's included in his introduction, and it's actually really lovely. He's actually made a connection also to a poem by William Blake, which I've always loved actually growing up. So I'm just going to read that section just to give a bit of context. So poetry is a connecting science, an art of unveiling the web of interconnectedness that lies hidden in plain sight beneath the appearance of outward forms. Poetry is a means to point to the eternal in the intemporal, the universe in the particular, the pattern in the random, the meaning in the seemingly inconsequential. In the words of Percy Shelley, poetry lifts the veil from the hidden beauty of the world and makes familiar objects be as if they were not familiar. William Blake put it succinctly: to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. So that really beautifully sums up actually the link between this idea of creating meaning in something, and also to look deeper, and that kind of juxtaposition between the small and the big, or the kind of the profound and what we might think actually is almost meaningless and insignificant, but actually when you really start looking at something and with a bit more meaning, how actually deep things it can be. So I think in that sense it's a lovely introduction to the collection of poetry. And then he also in the book refers to a hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is: the truest thing that a poet has ever said, everything other than God is vanity. So again, I think that's something really, I guess, to think about, that when anything that we do in life, I guess, is that what is the meaning and the purpose behind it? Are we doing it for Allah, or is it just for our own selves? And this idea that actually any form of vanity or pride, it is really a veil between us and God, and we need to, I think, always constantly be checking ourselves. Now, so the collection of poems there's quite a few, so some are longer than others. So what I might do actually is share one of them, and the one I will read out is the title of the book itself. So the poem is called Empty and the Ocean. And just before actually I start reading it, it would be really lovely to hear any comments or views that you have. So you can call in this morning on 01582 481 822, or you can WhatsApp in on 07779 481 822. Maybe actually you enjoy writing poetry yourself, maybe as a hobby, or maybe, and you don't really get a chance to share it. I would love to hear it, so please do. You can obviously WhatsApp it in and I can read it out, or you can call in as well and share it. It'd be lovely to hear some of our poets out there. So coming back to Baraka Blue, this is called Empty and the Ocean. Empty and the ocean, gentle and degrees, pondering the notion, peering through the breeze, watching how you're starving, coloured all in pain, your nonchalance disarming, but this is the final grain. When saying all means nothing, and all you give is lost, when darkness calls your number, and time itself is crossed, when winter is your witness, and all the crowds alone, when silly pride is finished, and you taste what is unknown, when all that you were chasing has vanished with the sand, when all the mirrors facing reveal a broken man, when all the hopes of one day had finally run their course, and all of the excuses stood pointing at their source, when all are standing naked, focused on their own, when the sun itself is burning to be shaded by the throne, when all of the suggestions have vanished from your mind, and all unanswered questions have opened up their blinds, all of the emotion seeking solace in the forms, empty and the ocean, the morning after storms, picking up the pieces, searching through debris, moments that release us, gentle and degrees. Whisper to the skyline, someone take me home. Here comes another high tide, it's time you walk alone. Like all the hands of sailors, I'm cracked and weather worn. Fog has filled the harbour, I'm waiting on the horn. So I think it's really a beautiful poem that Baraka Blue has written. He's obviously chosen the title of that poem to be the title of the book. And I think from reading it, it really does give this... I guess my first reaction is kind of just this idea of vastness, and it could just be because of the fact that there's a reference to the ocean, because when I hear the word ocean somewhere, it really does, it's just something so much bigger and so much and so, yeah, like I said, just vast, and this idea of trying to encompass something. But obviously we know that Allah is the one that is all encompassing, and the fact that we have oceans. I mean, we only, I guess, need to go to the seaside and just see the sea. And when you're standing and you're kind of looking out to the horizon, it's just kind of never ending. But yeah, and then so in terms of the references he makes, and it's just a lovely I guess kind of rhythm to it, actually, in the way that obviously some of the couplets obviously are rhyming, but also it's just the language itself, because it's so simple, I guess, that the words and the language that he's using, but it's just really quite meaningful, and especially, I guess, one of my favorite bits probably is the bit when he says, so when all that you were chasing has vanished with the sand, when all the mirrors facing reveal a broken man. And again, I guess, this idea of brokenness and the fact that actually we as human beings, we are pretty much quite broken. And that's not really meant in a morbid way, but this reflection that the reason we are in the dunya, obviously we have a purpose, but it's really about trying to walk on that journey back home, And I only saw somebody, actually there was a post on Facebook this morning by a friend of mine who was just kind of saying, what is the point of life? And it was really interesting to read some of the responses that she's getting, and actually the responses are beautiful. You know, people are like, you know, it's just, you know, to live or to, you know, walk, and actually that's what reminded me, because somebody said it's about walking each other home, you know, and it's the idea of companionship and being together, but then also realizing that we are actually broken, and but we know, and our teachers tell us that, you know, Allah is with the brokenhearted, and it's really how we make, I guess, the most of that. And then I think the other bit was also really stood out for me is when all are standing naked, focused on their own, when the sun itself is burning to be shaded by the throne. Again, obviously, that's a reference to the Day of Judgment, then, that despite how many attachments we have to this world, and actually that reminds us of one of the previous shows I did. I had Shana as a guest on the show. We were talking about Yasmin Jahid's How to Reclaim Your Heart, and this reference that she makes also to this idea that we are, I guess, you know, trying to do our best to kind of get through life, but this idea that on the Day of Judgment, obviously, we will. Oh yeah, that's what it was. I lost my train of thought there. This idea that we have attachments, and actually how that can actually really impact on our life. The more that we attach ourselves to materialistic things, and actually not even necessarily just materialistic, even people and places. Is that in the dunya we put so much attachment to it, and then as soon as we experience loss, it really, really affects us, and we get really low. You know, it can affect our iman and things like that. But actually, that's why it's so important to have, you know, attachment with Allah. But by the same token, the Day of Judgment, we know that actually we are only going to be there for our own selves. We will not have any it's not even, I guess, about having no time. We just won't have the capacity on that day to worry about anybody or anything except for our own selves. So the way he's actually summed that up, that we literally will be just focused on ourselves, and obviously we know it's going to be the sun's going to be very close, it's going to be hot, and this seeking of the shade of Allah, and how important that is going to be. And I think he's referred to that in a really interesting way. And then obviously, even within the poem, the section, he actually uses the name of the title, Empty in the Ocean. It's all of the emotions seeking solace in the forms, empty in the ocean, the morning after storms. So I'm not quite sure actually what to make of this idea of empty in the ocean, but I guess it's coming back to this idea of the kind of paradox in life. So you can have the vastness and have maybe so many things where it literally is as full as, you know, maybe the ocean, but then also by the same token feel quite empty. And I think it's that kind of comparison that really helps you appreciate both senses actually as well. So I think actually as a title, and this reference to trying to seek solace and the morning after storms as well. Because I mean, we have that saying, don't we, in terms of you know, weathering the storm, or the calm before the storm. There's all these references, I guess, in life when we're talking about the experiences that we have, and I guess he's just trying to make references to emotions and how we are, and then how, I guess, we almost what word am I looking for? Almost like a pendulum, that we're sometimes feeling in a particular way where everything's really wonderful and everything's, you know, we feel full of life, but then, you know, there could be something else that can happen and the pendulum literally swings the other way, and we're feeling completely empty and a little bit low. But I guess that's maybe that's what life is. It's that kind of swinging to and fro, but then seeing how we can actually respond and reflect during those times that we have. And then it's a really interesting ending to that poem. So it's like, all the hands of sailors, I'm cracked and weather worn. Fog has filled the harbour, I'm waiting on the horn. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure exactly what to make of that. So if you have any thoughts, please do call in. It's 01582 481 822, or you can WhatsApp in on 07779 481 822. I mean, I guess this idea of being a sailor, you would obviously the amount you use your hands, and the fact that they would be cracked, and they, you know, just showing a lot of, you know, so much labour, and this idea that obviously when you are on a ship or and obviously there's fog. Obviously there is always a horn just to I guess mark your presence. But the fact that he ends the poem by saying I'm waiting on the horn, I mean there obviously could be, you know, two meanings there. He's using the metaphor of being on a boat and wait, you know, in fog, perhaps feeling quite lost, and then waiting for the actual kind of horn. But then it could also be a reference, because he already makes a reference to the Day of Judgment, that this idea that we are all in this dunya, and we know that Allah has created angels, and there's one angel who is literally waiting with the horn that's going to be blown on the Day of Judgment, and it's at at his mouth, and the angel is his eyes are actually upon the throne of Allah, just waiting for the command. And the fact that actually we are that close, and we do sometimes think that, well, you know, the end of life, or so to speak, is it's probably, you know, way away in the future, but actually when we think about how imminent that end is, and how we should be really prepared for that end. But I mean, I say the word end, but obviously it's only the beginning of, I guess, the next and eternal life. So there's always, I think, different ways of approaching and thinking about things. So that is one of the first poems I've talked about, called Empty and the Ocean by Baraka Blue. After the break, we are going to discuss another poem called Drawing Muhammad, which again is a lovely poem that Baraka Blue has written. So in the meantime, obviously Ramadan is over when I was last in the studio, so you can actually go and grab yourself a tea or coffee and a little snack. And I hope, I'm not sure what the weather's outside like, but I hope it's nice and warm, and I will see you in a bit. Assalamu alaikum.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. I am your host, Imrana Mahmood. It is Tuesday the 18th of June and it's 10:30. I hope you are having a wonderful morning. The weather is a little bit better, thank goodness, because last week was it last week? God, I don't remember, but it was a complete downpour, and it was, I really struggled. I really just could not understand how we're in June, and you know, we all the talk about integration. Honestly, the weather should really learn to integrate itself. That's what I say. Right. So today's show is well, we are discussing Empty and the Ocean by Baraka Blue. So it's a collection of poems, and Baraka Blue is a poet, a musician, an author, a teacher, an MC, and he's a really talented and an amazing artist. We had the pleasure of having him in Luton a couple of years ago, and I hope, you know, it's something we can do again. His poetry is really beautiful, it's profound, and it's, you know, in a really simple way. What I'm going to do now is actually go on to our next poem to talk a little bit about it. The first poem we spoke about is called Empty in the Ocean, which is the same name as the title of the book, and we're talking actually about those two kind of the juxtaposition between something which is completely empty, comparing it to something so full and so vast like the ocean. And actually I guess what I was trying to say is perhaps that is what life is. It's these kind of this idea that it's just a pendulum, and we swing from one to the other, and these feelings of being high or low. And I know one of the best things that actually I took from Baraka Blue when he was in Luton, I met him, and he was giving a talk, and this idea that we really do need to upgrade our intoxicants. And his reference was this idea that, you know, when we study the Persian poet Rumi or things like that, and there's always a reference to things like you know, a wine or things like that, but actually obviously Rumi was not talking about actual, you know, alcohol like nowadays. This idea that actually we are talking about something so much more profound, and this connection to the divine, and this idea of drunkenness, but just because, you know, we're just full of love for Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, and all these kind of references, they really do make you think and appreciate things like poetry actually in terms of a form of art. Now, one of my favourite poems by Baraka Blue is called Drawing Muhammad. So I will give you a quick background actually on my I guess take on it, and then we have an audio of Baraka Blue actually that I will play, because obviously he is going to share that in a much more better way than I could ever read. But yeah, so just I guess give you a bit of a context, a very simple one. It's called Drawing Muhammad, and it was in reference, from what I'm assuming, so this is not what Baraka Blue said, but obviously we know that there's been many occasions where people have tried to attack the Prophet ﷺ or attack the faith through trying to depict the image of the Prophet ﷺ, which we know obviously is not something that we do now. And this was something I assume that he wrote to kind of challenge that notion. And it is really a lovely poem, which I am now going to play for you. And I just hope that it is going to come up. So it's called Drawing Muhammad.
Drawing Muhammad. Draw the Prophet. Could you draw the jewel at the center of the lotus blossom of beginningless being if you wanted? Could you draw the bucket from the well of existence until you've exhausted every droplet? Draw the breath into your lungs and let your tongue draw Muhammad. Can you draw the light as it enters your optics? Can you draw the thought as it enters your conscience? Can you draw the light that drew the pen and the tablet that drew his praises upon it? Draw the breath into your lungs and exhale Muhammad. Can you draw the sun in its glory? Can you draw the colors in autumn? Draw the bucket from the well of existence till you've exhausted every droplet. Then draw your lips to the cup of praise and sip what is offered. But you will still have not approached the topic of the form, let alone the meaning of Muhammad. Can you draw what he heard in the cave? Can you draw the two bows' distance, what was witnessed by the praised prophet's slave? May you be drawn to his banner when you raise from your grave. Can you draw a heart that could bear the weight of the names? Can you draw a mother's love for her child? Can you draw the calm in the midst of the wild? Can you draw forgiveness for your rabid oppressors and those who tried to murder you for sharing your message? Those who mocked you violently in your absence and presence? Draw the way he used their hatred to transmit a lesson. Draw peace in his heart, smiling at those seeking a fight, knowing even those who attack him are made of his light. You can draw the full moon in all of its glory, but to behold his countenance is a whole different story. You may not be able to draw this, but the best place to start is to draw his remembrance into your heart. Is the moon offended by the bark of dogs in the dark? Or does his light embrace all creatures, just like the ark? You may not be able to draw him, but the best place to start is to draw his attributes inward. That is the art. If all the nows in eternity and infinity conspired to draw the prophet, they would prostrate to the throne of divinity in awe and incapacity before their pens hit paper. In the ancient gatherings of the prophets and sages, all tongues fell silent before they exhausted his praises. And for those veiled from his light by their hatred, we weep in the depths of the night in prostration, that they no longer be deprived of the gifts so sacred, gazing upon his face, best of creation. So yes, brothers and sisters, let's all draw the prophet. Draw the breath into your lungs, and on the canvas of your soul, let love draw Muhammad.
So I hope you heard that beautiful poem by Baraka Blue called Drawing Muhammad. And that's actually from a website that you can download the track, and you can kind of name your price on it. It's called Alchemical Theatre. So I think if you Google that, you should be able to actually download that track and just name a price on it. And obviously it's something I'd recommend just to have actually on your phone as an MP3 just to listen to, because it is one of actually my favourites. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it was in kind of to challenge this notion of drawing the Prophet ﷺ, and the fact that we have had people recently and in the past to almost wanting to ridicule and to criticise and just to challenge, I guess, this idea that when we say that we don't depict any image of the Prophet ﷺ, they actually go out of their way and want to do it. But also, I think it's important to then understand how do we react and respond to that. So historically, I mean, things have, the prophets have always been mocked, right? We know this from the Quran, from when we study the stories of all the prophets, that when Allah sent them, Allah says himself that they were mocked and they were ridiculed, that not everybody believed them, followed them, etc. And in what ways is it that we respond? I know there's obviously been times in the past where things have happened and we have resorted to how would I describe it, I guess more aggressive forms of kind of reacting. And that's not me to actually, that's not for me to criticize or say anything of the sort, but it's actually the beauty of the way in which I guess Baraka Blue has kind of responded to those things through a poem, and actually kind of making a challenge to those who have challenged this notion of drawing him. So he obviously starts with the question. So obviously, listening to audio, I'm not sure if that might come across, but in the poem itself, when you read the book, it's the first line is draw the Prophet with a question mark. So it's beautiful. So he's obviously posing a question there that you're trying to draw the Prophet, and then he goes into this beautiful kind of analogies of what is it that you're actually trying to draw. So the first section, he's saying, could you draw the jewel at the center of the lotus blossom of beginningless being if you wanted? Can you draw the bucket from the well of existence until you've exhausted every droplet? Draw the breath into your lungs and let your tongue draw Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this idea that there's this things which are almost beyond things like matter, that when we talk about the metaphysical and we talk about the mystical, and I guess obviously there's a lot of focus on things which are based in certain aspects of our religion that sometimes we forget, because we become very ritualistic in terms of what we need to do in terms of praying and fasting and all these things, and we forget sometimes to take a pause and reflect. So even the reference to draw the breath into your lungs, I mean, literally, it's just it really does make you think, because breathing is something that happens. It's a passive. It's something that happens passively. We don't think about it, but it's true, we would not be able to draw, right, us drawing the breath into our lungs, not really, not that real living, breathing, part that we are always engaged in, but we don't really think about. He then goes on to talk a little bit about, can you, so he again poses two questions. Can you draw the light as it enters your optics? Can you draw the thought as it enters your conscience? So again, this reference to things that are happening beyond our controls, things that we don't sustain, we know that Allah sustains, and this idea of light, and if you actually have studied science and, the why is it, or what is it that makes us see, it is literally light and entering our eye and then reflecting off an object. And the fact that even when you start going deeper and deeper into what light is, and we know that there's a spectrum, if you have a prism and you refract white light, and we have the colors that we then get, which obviously we refer to as a rainbow. But again, it's true, we wouldn't be able to actually really draw that. I mean, there might be diagrams. I mean, we know that it's part of our kind of Islamic heritage, where we basically invented the camera. But the camera obscura is something, again, you might see diagrams of that, of how the camera actually works, but it's only like it's nothing compared to how our actual eye works, right? So definitely it's not something that we would, I guess, really be able to visually capture in its true essence. He then in that same section says, can you draw the light that drew the pen and the tablet that wrote his praises upon it? Again, in reference to the beginning of time, that we know when Allah created the tablet and the pen, and again in reference to the fact that the first revelation of the Prophet ﷺ obviously was Iqra, it was read, but then there's also obviously an ayah which talks about qalam and the pen and the power of the pen, and the importance of it, in the fact that when the pen actually obviously wrote on the tablet, and all of time was encapsulated in terms of Allah's knowledge. So again, this idea that, coming back to the title of the book, which is Empty and the Ocean by Baraka Blue, this idea of vastness and things which are completely beyond our comprehension, but how we can still try to make sense of that. And that's why I think this poem, Drawing Muhammad, is really, really posing a challenge to all those out there who try to ridicule or even kind of provoke a response, I guess, of Muslims, that they think that by doing these actions of I think, I can't remember when it was, a couple of years ago, someone was like, let's we're going to do a competition on drawing Muhammad. And to be honest, they can try as much as they want, I guess, to really provoke and to offend, but it comes back to how are we then responding. And that's why I think this poem is quite it's an important poem, especially in the current political, socio-political context as well, but more than that, it's just the meaning of it. So if we put, for once, if possible, the politics aside, but just really, even for our own selves, it's a challenge to our own selves as well, that how much time do we really spend, maybe even thinking about the Prophet ﷺ, and we know we've got so many hadith of his description, and and it's so important, actually. They say that you should study the seerah, but also study the shama'il, which is obviously the description of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's I remember, and it was really lovely to read that actually out of all the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the best descriptions were given by the young children, because as adults, the companions were very shy to look directly at the Prophet ﷺ, just out of respect and out of awe. But obviously as young children, anyone who is a parent knows that children literally do whatever they want. But they would really they'd spend time with the Prophet ﷺ, and they then gave, really great and really detailed descriptions of what the Prophet ﷺ looked like. And we know in terms of his hair and his eyes and his build, and we know that actually he was the most beautiful of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, I guess this is in some ways maybe in honor of that, I think Baraka Blue, I'm sure, obviously I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think I myself, I do sometimes write poetry, and I probably struggle actually to try to even begin, how do I even try to explore, in terms of what the Prophet said, not necessarily trying to say what he looks like, but just to do justice on him as a person, right? So that's why I think this is a really great way, I think, of just trying to explore that through poetry. It then also makes a reference to, can you draw what he heard in the cave? Can you draw the 2 bells distance, what was witnessed by the praised prophet slave? And that obviously is in reference to the revelation that he received in Mount Hira, and also when he actually travelled to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heavens. So there are some lovely references, and I guess it's almost a really also lovely way of just, if you were to share this with your children, or maybe your spouse, that maybe they've not read it before, and through the poem you can then make reference back to obviously the stories of the Quran and the Sunnah and the Seerah, etc. So again, I think it's always important that, I know sometimes we don't maybe place that much importance on the arts, but things like poetry, creative writing, actually there's any art form, you can always link it back to something with your own faith. And I think we always need to do that, and that's when intentions become really important. So you make the intention for whatever you do. Honestly, even if some of us, maybe we love watching movies and we go to the cinema and we might think, I don't know if this, is it a waste of time? Am I just But actually make the intention, even for a movie, as long as it's obviously nothing not suitable, so to speak, make the intention, for Allah, that maybe you might gain something from watching or reading something that you might seem trivial, but actually you could find some sort of profound meaning in it. And I think it's really important to do that just in our daily lives anyway. So that was the poem called Drawing Muhammad. I'm going to maybe share one more, which is, again, it's a really interesting one. It's one of those actually that I've probably have to sit down with friends and really kind of unpick it, but I will share it. It's called Time and Space. Time is silly, so is space. I'm here, I'm there, I'm then, I'm now. There it's then now. Here it's not yet then. He was and no longer is, as all of us will be. We once weren't, and yet we are. It never wasn't now, and then has never come. Yet I wait for a moment when I'll be all I ever was. Time is silly, so is space. Here and now is all we've ever found. Though we've searched for then and there, it always slipped our grasp somehow. The future was a lie. The past is but a dream. There is just a place no one here has ever been. When I finally got to then, it had turned itself into now. And every now and then I'd find that then was here somehow. When I finally got to there, here is all that I could see. Oh, I kept on seeking you, but when I got to you, my eye was you and you were me. So that's a nice one to get everybody really confused, right? I think it's a really cool poem, actually. Because the fact that it starts by saying time is silly, and actually does really make you think that. So the way he's written it, I think it's intentionally to make you get a little bit a bit perplexed actually on what time really is. And obviously we know, we always hear the thing that this idea that time is relative, and if we study a bit of science and Einstein, etc. But what does that actually mean? When we say that is time relative, but he's basically saying time is silly, and so is space, apparently. But yeah, and it's this focus on what does it mean to be, okay? What does it mean to exist? That's, I guess, what I take from it. And this idea that we can be in one moment, in one space now, and literally with a click of our fingers, it's become the past. And actually every moment we're living, every breath that we take, it becomes our history straight away. So this is it, this idea when we talk a lot about the past and the future, is that even something real? I have no idea. When you start thinking like that, I do get a little bit, I think I just confused myself. But yeah, it really is something to think about, and that's what he's saying, that so especially the bit where he says the future was a lie, the past is but a dream. There is just a place no one here has never been. But yeah, it's true. Because the past is something that's already happened. The future, we don't know, obviously, what's going to happen. So the only thing we really can do is think about the here and the now. But then he's also questioning, what does that actually mean? And it's such an existential, I think, thing to think about. But and it does really make you think of our place, and what, I guess, all of this means in terms of the life and the dunya. And especially there's one bit where he says it's always slipped our grasp somehow. And we know that time is one of those things. We can never hold on to it. And in reference to Quran and Surah Al-Asr, where Allah, he swears by time and says that that we are, that as in human beings, we are in a state of loss, except those obviously who are righteous and have patience, etc. So again, we need to understand that as much as we try to hold on to time, obviously every moment that passes, we are obviously getting closer to whatever our kind of destiny, I guess, is, and whatever our the meaning purpose of our life is, and it's really important to remember those things. And I think it's lovely when near the end he says, "Oh, I kept on seeking you, but when I got to you, my eye was you and you were me." I mean, I have talked about this to somebody in the past, and what does that actually really mean? So if we're talking about seeking and being a seeker, obviously we're seeking the divine, okay, but what does it mean? Do we ever find the divine? And there's again this notion of, especially in Sufi poetry as well, that actually to know Allah, you need to know yourself, and how important that really is, because we can try to search Allah on the outside and think, he's there or here. And I actually had my daughter say to me just recently that, sometimes because of maybe a book she's read or something she's seen on TV, how they depict God as this being on a cloud and this is how he looks, and but straight away she goes, I know that Allah doesn't look like that, and I know that he's kind of beyond imagination, and I think it's so important to actually just for her, somebody who, she's quite young, she's only 9, to really understand that when we talk about the attributes of Allah that we cannot comprehend, and as soon as something comes into our mind where we think, oh, maybe that's what Allah might look like, we know straight away that that's not any image or anything that enters our mind. We know it's not, because Allah is beyond creation. But this idea that when he says that I kept seeking you, but when I got to you, my eye was you and you were me. But this idea that actually if we know ourselves, we will know Allah, because that really is because Allah is within us. When Allah says that I'm closer to you than your jugular vein, there's no reason then to think that Allah is beyond us, that he's beyond I guess more importantly, knowing that he's actually really near. And I think that we can take a lot of comfort and solace in that, especially at times when maybe things aren't going quite right, or maybe they're going really, really brilliantly. It's really important to remember that Allah is the source of everything. He is the source for all goodness and anything that exists, and it's just something. It's a beautiful, I guess, reminder for ourselves, especially. So I guess coming back to the book by so Empty and the Ocean by Baraka Blue. I mean, there are so many more poems that obviously that are in the book. I've literally only touched upon a couple because it is one of those things that actually you read, and like I said, that they're quite simple, but then it's about taking time. Maybe you read one a day or even one a week, and you just spend a bit of time really reflecting on that. And I think that's when poetry can really be quite powerful. So he's got another poem about mothers, which again is really, really lovely. There's one about death, there's one about dreams, there's one in reference to Karbala. He also has one called Destroy the Mosque, and again it's reference to other poets and the way they've tackled certain issues. But all in all, it's definitely a book, a poetry book that I would recommend. So it's Empty in the Ocean by Baraka Blue. He also does have a couple of other books that you can probably refer to. And obviously, we started the show with his beautiful dua called Love and Light, which you can see on YouTube. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you've enjoyed the poetry. And I will be back in 2 weeks. So I will see you then. Have a lovely day. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.